You wake up, but you can't move. There's a weight in your chest, heavy, deliberate, alive. The room is your room, the shadows are your shadows. But there's something else in the room, you can feel it watching. You try to scream and nothing comes out. You try to lift your arm, but it refuses. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it's gone. You sit up gasping, heart hammering, and tell yourself it was only a dream. But people have been having this same dream for at least 1,000 years. Across continents, across languages, across cultures that have never met. And for most of human history, they all agreed on one thing. It wasn't a dream at all. It was her. Today, we're going after a really interesting one because the word nightmare, a word you've used 100 times without thinking about it, is not just a word, it's the name of a creature. A specific creature with a specific job. And once you know the story behind her, you start seeing her fingerprints absolutely everywhere. In folklore, in medicine, in poetry, and in one of the most famous and unsettling paintings in Western art. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's talk about the Mare. Let's start with the word, because it's doing a lot of work. When we say nightmare today, we mean a bad dream, that's it. A scary dream, maybe one where you've fallen or been chased or showing up to an exam you forgot to study for. But the word is much, much older than that meaning. And it's not really about dreaming. The night part, that one's obvious. But the mare part has nothing to do with horses. It comes from an Old English word mare, and you find versions of it all over the Germanic and Slavic world. In Old Norse, she's the Mara. In German, Mare. In Dutch, Nachtmerrie. In Polish, Zmora. In Croatian, Mora. And in every single one of those traditions, the mare is not a feeling, she's a being. She is specifically a malevolent female spirit who comes to you at night, sits on your chest while you sleep, and feeds on you. Sometimes she suffocates you. Sometimes she rides you like a horse until dawn, which is actually where the phrase hag-ridden comes from. Sometimes she just watches, but she's always heavy, she's always real, and she's always there when you can't move. So when our ancestors said someone had a nightmare, they didn't mean they had an upsetting dream. They meant quite literally, a mare came in the night. That shift from a creature to a feeling took centuries, and honestly, I think something got lost in the translation. Because when you call it a bad dream, you can shrug it off in the morning. When you call it the mare, you start checking the locks. So, who is she? What does the folklore actually say? The mare is almost always female. That's one of the most consistent details across hundreds of miles and hundreds of years. She's described as a woman or sometimes the spirit of a woman. In some Slavic traditions, she's tall and pale with long tangled hair. In Scandinavian stories, she's small enough to slip through a keyhole, which is how she gets in. In some German accounts, she's barely visible at all, just a pressure, a presence, a weight. There's a belief that she's so light she can walk on water without leaving a ripple. But the moment she settles on your chest, she becomes impossibly heavy. Her method is almost always the same. She enters the bedroom while you're asleep. She sits or crouches or lies on top of the sleeper. And then she presses. The pressure makes it impossible to breathe properly, impossible to move, impossible to cry out. The sleeper is fully aware, that's the horror of it. You know she's there, you just can't do anything about it. And here where it gets darker. In many traditions, the mare doesn't just suffocate. She feeds, she drinks breath, she drinks vital energy. In some stories, she'll braid your hair into impossible knots overnight. And finding those knots in the morning was proof she'd been there. In some regions, farmers would find their horses sweating and exhausted in the morning, with their manes tangled, and they knew the mare had been riding them all night instead. Same creature, same behavior, just a different victim. So, who was she in life? Because in many traditions, she's not a demon from some other realm. She's the spirit of a real person, almost always a woman whose soul wanders at night without her knowing. In some accounts, a girl born during a particular phase of the moon or as the seventh daughter, or under certain unlucky stars will become a Mora without ever choosing to. She lives a normal life by day. She might be your neighbor, your sister, your wife. She has no idea what she does at night, and her spirit slips out of her body while she sleeps and goes hunting. Which means in the logic of the folklore, the mare is both predator and victim. She's cursed. She doesn't want this, but she comes anyway. And that's a much sadder story than just evil demon attacks villagers. That's a story about something hidden inside ordinary life. Now, here's the thing about folklore. Wherever there is a monster, there is always a list of defenses, and the defenses are often weirder and more specific than the monster herself, because they tell you what people were actually doing, what they put in their houses, what they whispered before bed, what they hung above the door. So, how do you stop the mare? The most common defense across almost every tradition is iron. A knife under the pillow, an iron nail driven into the door frame, a pair of scissors open in the shape of a cross on the bedside table. The mare, like a lot of spirits, can't cross iron. In some places, you sleep with your shoes pointed away from the bed. The idea being that the mare gets confused, follows the toes, and walks out of the room. In some regions, you mark the doorframe with chalk or with a specific symbol, a 5-pointed star drawn in one continuous line. She can't cross it because she has to trace every line she encounters. And the 5-pointed star drawn correctly has no end and no beginning. She'd be stuck tracing it forever. So she gives up and goes somewhere else. In some places, people would have a broom upside down by the bed. Same logic, she has to count every straw before she can do anything else. And by the time she's done, the sun's up. There are protective stones. Across multiple cultures, people would find these old stones with natural holes worn through them. They were called hag stones or adder stones, and people hung them above the bed to keep the mare out. The hole was the key, she couldn't pass through it. And then there are the prayers, the charms, the little spoken formulas you'd say before sleep. Some of them are Christian. Most of them are much older than that and got a Christian coat of paint somewhere along the way. The pattern is almost always the same. You name her, you tell her to leave, you list the things she has to do before she's allowed to harm you. Count every leaf on every tree, cross every river, untie every knot in the sea. Impossible tasks designed to keep her busy until morning, because the mare, like most night spirits, can't survive the dawn. What I find genuinely moving about all of this is that it's the same impulse you and I still have. When something scares us, we make rules, we make rituals. If I just lock the door twice, if I just check on the kids one more time, if I just don't think about it, the defenses change, but the instinct doesn't. We've been trying to keep the mare out of our bedrooms for a very, very long time. Okay, let's pull back for a second and ask the question, what was actually going on? Because here's the thing, the experience the folklore describes is not vague. It's incredibly specific. You're asleep, you wake up or you think you wake up, you're aware of the room, you can't move a single muscle, there is a crushing weight on your chest, you can't breathe properly, you feel a presence in the room, often described as standing by the bed or sitting on you. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you only sense it. There is overwhelming dread, and then, after seconds or minutes that feels like hours, it ends. That's not a dream. That's a recognized medical phenomenon called sleep paralysis. Here's what's happening psychologically. When you enter REM sleep, the dreaming stage, your brain does something clever. It paralyzes most of your body. Your muscles essentially get switched off, so you don't physically act out your dream and hurt yourself. It's a safety mechanism, and it works extremely well. But sometimes, the wires get crossed. Sometimes you wake up, your conscious mind comes online before the paralysis has worn off. So now you're awake, you can think, you can perceive, but your body is still locked down. You can't move, you can't speak, and the muscles you normally use to take a deep breath are partially suppressed, which is where the chest pressure comes from. And on top of all that, your brain is still partly in dream mode. It's still generating imagery, so it produces hallucinations, usually auditory and visual, that feel completely real, because in that moment to your brain they are real. And the hallucinations have a really consistent flavor. People report a presence in the room, a figure, often shadowy, often female, sometimes pressure on the chest, sometimes the sensation of being held down or watched or whispered to. Sound familiar? This isn't rare. Estimates vary, but somewhere between roughly 20 and 40% of people will experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. It happens more often when you're sleep deprived, stressed, sleeping on your back, or following an irregular sleep schedule, which means our ancestors, working long days, sleeping in a cold dark rooms with no electric light, often on their backs, they were prime candidates. But here's what I want to be careful about. Saying it was sleep paralysis doesn't really explain the mare. It explains the trigger. It doesn't explain why people across totally unrelated cultures all reported the same figure, female, heavy, sitting on the chest. That part is genuinely strange. And there are a few theories. Some researchers think the human brain under those specific conditions just produces certain archetypes by default. Others think it's cultural, that once a story like the mare exists, it shapes what people expect to see and so they see it. Probably it's some of both. What I love about this is that it doesn't make the folklore less interesting, it makes it more interesting. Because now we know that for 1,000 years, people in completely separate parts of the world were having the same neurological experience and reaching for the same explanation. They weren't making her up, they were describing something real, they just gave it a name and a face. Which brings us to a Swiss painter named Henry Fuseli. In 1781, Fuseli exhibited a painting at the Royal Academy in London that absolutely scandalized the city. People couldn't stop talking about it. It was reproduced as a print and sold thousands of copies. Versions of it ended up on the walls of doctors, writers, intellectuals across Europe. Sigmund Freud reportedly had a copy hanging in his apartment in Vienna over a century later. The painting is called The Nightmare. If you've never seen it, picture this. A woman lies sprawled on a bed, dressed in white, head and arms thrown back in a deep, unnatural sleep. Her body is stretched in a posture that's somewhere between fainting and seduction. Vulnerable, exposed, utterly out. Crouched on her chest is a small, dark, hideous creature. An imp, a goblin, a demon. It stares straight out of the painting directly at you, with this awful, little-known expression. And looming behind the bed, parting the curtains, is the head of a horse. Eyes blank and white, nostrils flared. It's one of those images that once you see it, you don't really unsee. And it captures the folklore perfectly. The crushing weight on the chest in the form of the demon. The horse, the mare, watching from behind. The woman, paralyzed, unaware, helpless. Fuseli took 1,000 years of folk belief and put it on a canvas in one image. But here's where it gets interesting, because The Nightmare isn't just a painting about the mare. It's also almost certainly a painting about a real woman, and about Fuseli himself. Her name was Anna Lendl. She was the niece of one of Fuseli's close friends, a Swiss physiognomist named Johann Caspar Lavater. Fuseli met her in Zurich in the late 1770s, and by all accounts, he fell for her instantly and completely. The problem was, Anna's family did not want her marrying a painter. Fuseli was talented, ambitious, and broke. He was also moody, intense, and a little odd. He left for Italy to continue developing his art, fully expecting to return, marry Anna, and start a life with her. While he was gone, her family married her to someone else, a respectable merchant. By the time Fuseli got the news, it was already done. He was devastated, and the letters he wrote during this period are extraordinary, because they're not the letters of a heartbroken man being graceful about it. They're obsessive, feverish. There is a letter, and this is the one everybody points to, where he describes a dream he's had about her. He writes about lying in her bed. He writes about possessing her in his sleep. He writes about his thoughts twining around hers like serpents. He says that he grinds his teeth at the thought of any other man touching her. He describes wanting to fuse with her body and soul. It is, even by the standards of 18th century romantic correspondence, intense. It reads less like longing and more like haunting. And then, a few years later, he paints the nightmare. Now, our historians have debated this for 2 centuries, so I want to be honest about what we know and what we're guessing. We don't have a signed confession from Fuseli saying this painting is about Anna, but we have some really suggestive evidence. On the back of the original canvas, the actual back of the painting, there is another painting, a portrait of a young woman, and the woman it depicts widely believed to be Anna Landelt. So the painting of the sleeping woman and the demon on her chest has hidden on its reverse side, literally pressed against it, the face of the woman Fuseli loved and lost. You can read it a lot of ways, and people have. Some see it as a kind of revenge fantasy, Fuseli imagining Anna tormented in her sleep by the demon of his own desire. Some see it as a confession, Fuseli admitting that he is the demon, that his obsession is the weight on her chest. Some see it as a straightforward heartbreak painted in symbolic language. And some art historians push back on the whole reading, saying we're projecting modern psychology onto an 18th century work meant as a piece of Gothic theater for paying audiences. Honestly, I think it's probably all of those things at once. Great paintings tend to be. But what I keep coming back to is the double-sidedness. The public face of the painting is folklore, the mare, the demon, the horse, the universal nightmare. The hidden face is personal, a woman, a real woman, the love that didn't happen. And those two things, the ancient demon and the private heartbreak, are sandwiched together in a single object, separated by maybe a centimeter of canvas. That feels, to me anyway, like the most accurate portrait of what a nightmare actually is. Something old and something personal pressed together so tightly you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. So, why are we still talking about her? The mare should by all rights be a footnote. We have a medical explanation for sleep paralysis. We have lights we can switch on. We have phones we can scroll through at 3 a.m. when we can't sleep. The conditions that gave birth to her, long dark nights, no easy way to dispel a shadow, no one to call, those conditions are mostly gone, at least for those of us in modern world. And yet, survey people who've experienced sleep paralysis today in 21st century, and a striking number of them still describe a presence, often a figure, often female, often heavy, sometimes specifically sitting on the chest. The folklore wasn't manufactured by candlelight and superstition. It's a description of something the human brain still produces on a regular basis when the conditions are right. Which means the mare didn't go anywhere. We just stopped using her name. She's in the word nightmare every time you use it. She's in Fuseli's painting hanging in the Detroit Institute of Arts, where you can go and stand in front of her any day of the week. She's in dozens of horror movies that have stolen her composition without realizing it. That classic shot of a figure sitting on a sleeper's chest staring at the camera. She's in modern accounts of shadow people and old hag syndrome, which is what sleep paralysis is still called in the parts of the American South. Different name, same mare. And I think there is something almost comforting about that in a strange way. Not the experience, that's awful, but the continuity. The fact that some random night, somewhere on the other side of the world, a person you'll never meet will wake up, feel a weight on their chest, see a figure in the corner of the room, and reach for the same explanation a Polish farmer reached for in 1572, or a Norse sailor reached for in the year 800. Whatever else humans disagree about, we have apparently always agreed on this, that there is something in the dark that wants to sit on us while we sleep, and we have always tried to find ways to keep her out. So that's the mare, the demon in the word, the weight on the chest, the figure in Fuseli's painting, and maybe the ghost of Anna Landel pressed against the back of it. I find this stuff endlessly fascinating, because folklore is rarely just folklore. It's almost always something, a memory, a fear, a real experience that people didn't have the vocabulary for dressed up in story. The Mare is one of the cleanest examples of that, a neurological event with a name and a face and a 1,000-year career. If you've ever experienced sleep paralysis yourself, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. What you saw, what you felt, whether it matched the folklore or whether your version of the Mare looked like something else entirely. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Share this with someone who'd appreciate it. And thanks for spending this time with me. See you in the next one.